All right, let's dive right into this explainer and explore how the richest, most powerful country in history started out as an absolute geopolitical afterthought. It's a wildly fascinating historical journey, and I'm so excited to unpack exactly how America's rise to the number one spot was honestly completely unexpected. So, picture this for a second. When Christopher Columbus stumbled into the Caribbean back in 1492 looking for Asian spices, he completely missed what was going to become a global superpower. He didn't find those spices, right? But he did bring back gold to the King and Queen of Spain, and because of that, all the major European powers focused entirely on the gold-rich southern lands. They completely ignored North America for well over a century. That brings us to Section 1, An Unexpected New World. Now, during that earliest European land grab, Spain and Portugal literally drew a line on a map to divide the globe between themselves. In 1539, the Spanish actually did send an expedition up into North America, but finding no gold and no silver, they essentially just abandoned it. They viewed the land as completely useless, and this massive oversight left the door wide open for the English. After their very first colony at Roanoke mysteriously disappeared, they eventually settled Jamestown, and a bit later, strict Christians, known as the Pilgrims, arrived over in Plymouth. Moving right along to Section 2, Revolution and a New Nation. Fast forward to 1754. The East Coast is packed with British colonies boasting over 1 million people, while the French have claimed the middle of the continent. Naturally, a huge turf war breaks out. Step 1. The British, along with their colonial and Native American allies, defeat the French. This victory meant Britain gained Canada and French Louisiana, but they also gained a massive amount of war debt, and that kicks off a direct chain reaction. Britain needed money, which leads to Step 2, new taxes. That caused Step 3, the colonies revolting in 1776. And finally, Step 4, after winning the war and struggling with a really messy failing government, they wrote the U.S. Constitution in 1789 and elected George Washington. Let's look a little closer at that fallout, because the context is super important. The British felt completely justified in asking the colonists to foot the bill. I mean, from their perspective, they had just provided incredibly costly military protection to help the colonies defeat the French. To them, it was only fair that the colonies helped pay for that financial burden. But, as you probably know, the colonies vehemently disagreed. They felt like they were the ones always helping Britain. More importantly, they asked the big question: how can you tax us if we don't even get a vote? This fundamental dispute over taxation without representation turned into a huge fight, and that fight quickly escalated into an outright declaration of independence. Which takes us to Section 3, the Great Western Expansion. After initially struggling as 13 loosely connected states, the newly formed federal government finally stabilized. But there was a catch. With families averaging 7 children, the nation's population was literally doubling every 20 years. They desperately needed space. Enter one of the greatest real estate deals in human history. For exactly $15 million, America bought the massive Louisiana Territory from France, doubling the nation's size overnight. You might be wondering, why was it so cheap? Well, the Americans originally just wanted New Orleans to secure the Mississippi River, but over in Europe, Napoleon desperately needed cash to fund his impending invasion of Britain, and he was terrified the Americans might ally with the British if he didn't appease them, so he just sold them the whole thing. The sheer speed of what happened next is just wild. In 1819, they buy Florida. In 1845, they annex Texas, which had broken free from Mexico and was initially actually rejected by the U.S. over slavery disputes until President Polk changed the nation's mind. In 1846, they split the Oregon Territory with Britain, and by 1848, they win northern Mexico in a war. Through a crazy mix of incredible luck, negotiation, and a pretty ugly war with Mexico, the nation stretched from sea to sea in a mere 50 years, displacing Native American populations in the process. And here is a bizarrely funny historical coincidence at the end of that war. America paid Mexico that exact same sum, $15 million, to take ownership of those northern Mexican territories. They essentially just wrote another $15 million check for half of Mexico, and they even bought another piece of land for $10 million just 5 years later. Hitting the Pacific Ocean meant the western frontier was officially closed. So what do you do when you literally run out of continent? Well, the government passed the Guano Island Act. This incredibly unique law allowed U.S. citizens to claim random, uninhabited ocean islands for the United States, as long as they were covered in bird droppings, which were super valuable for resources at the time. And incredibly enough, that act is actually still a law today. Now for Section 4, Division and Reunion. Outwardly, the country was just booming with new land and California gold. But inwardly, it was tearing itself apart. The North viewed slavery as a great evil that had to be stopped, while the South relied on it as a totally foundational part of their economy. After decades of bitter arguments, this tension finally reached a boiling point when Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. Believing Lincoln was going to abolish slavery, the Southern states seceded and formed their own country. This plunged the newly expanded continent into a deeply deadly civil war. After massive, truly devastating casualties on both sides, the North emerged victorious. The slaves were freed, and the United States was finally reunited. Bringing us to Section 5, Becoming a World Power. Healing from the deep scars of the Civil War, the reunited nation almost immediately went right back to expanding its borders. But this time, they were looking completely beyond the North American continent. Just think about this deal. Secretary of State William Seward, who, incredibly, had just survived being stabbed on the exact same night President Lincoln was killed, sat down and haggled with the Russian Tsar's ambassador. He somehow managed to purchase the massive, resource-rich territory of Alaska for a mere $7 million. But expanding further raised a huge philosophical question. American businessmen had actually taken control of the Hawaiian Islands and asked the U.S. to annex them. Now, the U.S. president initially refused on moral grounds, believing a strong nation really shouldn't take advantage of the weak. But others argued, hey, if America didn't step in, another power like Germany or Japan was just going to seize those strategic islands for a future war anyway. It completely paralyzed the nation. Do you stay out of it, or do you protect American interests? It's a debate we honestly still see playing out in American politics today. Well, that debate ended abruptly in 1898. Cuba was fighting for independence from Spain, which was a cause a lot of Americans sympathized with. When a mysterious explosion sank an American warship nearby, the U.S. ordered Spain out. Spain declared war, but the U.S. quickly defeated them, capturing Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines, which effectively ended what was left of Columbus's Spanish Empire. And during the Spanish-American War, the U.S. also went ahead and officially annexed Hawaii to use as a naval base. Stepping onto the world stage meant America needed a world-class navy to protect all these new territories. Energetic new president Teddy Roosevelt wanted to build a canal to easily connect the oceans. He offered Colombia $10 million to build it in their territory. Colombia initially agreed, but then they abruptly backed out of the deal. Undeterred, Roosevelt basically just pivots. With a whole lot of audacity, he turned to the newly formed nation of Panama, struck a deal with them instead, and secured the real estate needed to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. By the time the Panama Canal was completed in 1914, the United States possessed the second largest navy in the entire world. They could now move their fleets between oceans rapidly, and they had firmly established themselves as a major global player, literally right in time for the outbreak of World War I. It is a truly fascinating journey, isn't it? When you look at the whole history of America, from a landmass completely ignored for a century through totally unexpected leaps, unbelievably cheap land purchases, and profound internal and external transformations, it became a global superpower in roughly 400 years. It really leaves us to wonder, as we look at the incredible momentum of this history, how will this relentless combination of luck, conflict, and money define the very next chapter?